Sometimes you don't want to come home because you can't put your heating on.
An estimated 3 million households, 13%, were in fuel poverty last year.
We eat according to price rather than enjoyment.
It's hard. It's really, really hard.
It is about numbers, and this massive increase in population has also made us all poorer too.
It's really bad, mate. I need to walk about one of these, man, look. It's what you need to walk about with to keep yourself safe, man.
Despite the idyllic imagery often associated with the United Kingdom, a land of charming villages, historic landmarks, and a rich cultural tapestry, things here are worse than you think. In the last 5 years, rent prices in London have increased by 32%. In Greenwich, rents rose even higher at 54%, from £531 in 2019 to £820 in 2024. In Manchester, rent prices increased by 20% between 2022 and 2023. By November 2024, they had risen by a further 13%, with many referring to it as a boiling point. This has caused many to choose long commutes instead of living where they work in order to save money.
The bus takes about 40 minutes to Liverpool, and then from Liverpool it would take an hour or hour and 20 minutes to Manchester. But then coming home, it can take me like 3 hours to get home. So yeah, it's quite draining.
In the UK's capital of London, on average, you'll need to be earning £76,261 a year to afford the average private rental price, which is triple the minimum wage. It's fair to say buying a home is no walk in the park either. The average first-time buyer in the UK needs an income of £60,600 to buy a home, the equivalent of 2 average UK salaries. This means that even many top earners are struggling to buy the home that they desire, with examples such as couples in the top 5% of earners being unable to upgrade from a 2-bedroom house to a 3-bedroom house. Lump this in with a major cost of living problem, rising crime rates, illegal immigration issues, and glaring concerns around pay within the healthcare system, and it's clear that the UK is in big trouble. And this is a huge change from the United Kingdom many once admired and respected.
People in Britain are waking up to the fact that we have a failed state in this country.
So, what's happening here? What went so drastically wrong? Today, on Across the Globe, we'll be exploring why living in the UK has become impossible.
The work is now being stepped up to make 2020 a year of prosperity and growth and hope, and to deliver a parliament that works for the people.
During the 2019 UK general election, Boris Johnson emerged as the Conservative Party's leader, promising a message of hope and change to a nation plagued by Brexit uncertainty. His campaign, Get Brexit Done, resonated with many as he vowed to deliver on the UK's long-stalled departure from the European Union.
Our job as the government, my job, is to bring this country together now and take us forward.
Johnson's populist approach tapped into a desire for stability and a fresh start, and he campaigned on a platform that emphasized his commitment to investing in public services, improving the NHS, and boosting economic growth. Key to his appeal was the notion that he would be a break from the perceived dithering of previous administrations, particularly Theresa May's, and that he had the resolve to deliver results, free from the complexities of EU membership. However, critics argued that his message was overly simplistic and ignored deeper issues such as social inequality, environmental degradation, and regional disparities. To that, Boris Johnson's election in 2019 marked the onset of a significant political divide within the UK, highlighting underlying tensions that had long simmered beneath the surface. Upon taking office, Johnson initially enjoyed a surge in popularity propelled by the promise to get Brexit done. However, his approval ratings were notably lower than those of recent leaders at a similar stage in their premierships. According to Sky News, Johnson was less popular on 2019 election day than either Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn had been in the 2017 general election. Under Boris Johnson's ruling, net migration to the UK rose significantly after Brexit, peaking at 764,000 in 2022, and was an estimated 685,000 in 2023, sparking nationwide concerns that are persisting today.
43% of people asked thought that immigration has a negative impact on British society.
To better understand why many were so apprehensive and disheveled by Johnson's election as Prime Minister, and how afterwards 3 in 4 Britons claimed he made issues such as immigration worse, we need to go back in history. The history of the United Kingdom is a rich tapestry woven from the threads of diverse cultures, invasions, and migrations over millennia. The early formation of what we now recognize as the UK began with the arrival of Celtic tribes long before the Romans invaded in 43 AD. Eventually, the Romans established influential settlements. But it was the Anglo-Saxons, along with subsequent waves of Viking and Norman invaders beginning in the 5th century, who significantly shaped its identity. Following the Norman conquest of 1066, England embarked on a period of dramatic transformation, consolidating power under a monarchy that would become one of the most formidable in Europe. Throughout the centuries, England, and later Great Britain, fostered relationships with other nations, epitomized by the expansion of the British Empire from the 16th to the early 20th centuries, which propelled it into a position of global dominance. During this era, the influx of migrants from various nations, Spaniards, Dutch, French Huguenots, and others, brought skilled labor, new ideas, and diverse cultures that were instrumental in the economic and social development of the kingdom. Colonization not only expanded the empire, but also facilitated a complex exchange of goods, cultures, and people, allowing the UK to leverage its immigrant populations to build its wealth, power, and cultural richness, ultimately shaping a nation defined by its diversity and historical complexity. The public perception of immigration in the UK has undergone significant shifts over the decades, influenced by various social, economic, political, and cultural factors. Initially, post-World War II, the UK experienced an influx of immigrants from former colonies, particularly from countries such as India, Pakistan, and Jamaica. These groups were largely welcomed for their contributions to rebuilding the nation, particularly in sectors like healthcare, transport, and manufacturing. However, as economic conditions fluctuated in the following decades, and the UK faced challenges such as high unemployment, public sentiment began to change. By the late 20th century, concerns about immigration surged, driven by fears of cultural dilution, competition for jobs, and pressures on public services. The rise of nationalist sentiments and increased media focus on issues surrounding immigration played a pivotal role in altering public opinion. As with any prime minister before him, Boris Johnson addressed both legal immigration and illegal immigration when he took office. He proudly continued the great British tradition of providing sanctuary to those in need, and stated that they must go about things the correct and lawful way, stressing that those who abuse the system and attempt to be smuggled across the channel will find no automatic path to settlement.
People thinking of making this journey, one, it is very hazardous. You may think the weather looks great, but it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. And the second thing is we will send you back.
However, many argue that Johnson did not stick to his threats. In 2021, 24,000 people illegally crossed the channel, but only 5 had been sent back. Net migration has been the main driver of population growth in the UK since 1994. In the year ending June 2024, the UK's net migration was 728,000, meaning more people came to the UK than left. This was driven by an increase in non-EU citizens. The Office for National Statistics projects that the UK population will increase by 9.9% from 2021 to 2036, reaching 73.7 million people, a number that many critics say the country simply will not be able to handle.
At this level of growth, it's unsustainable for this country, and we should be shocked by this. We should be really worried too.
To that, legal immigration, while contributing to the UK's economy, has faced scrutiny over the years. For instance, the implementation of policies like the points-based immigration system aimed to control and manage migration levels. Yet, it sparked debates around the perceived challenges in integrating newcomers and the strain on housing, healthcare, and education systems.
Points-based systems tend to be a bit more government-led because the government decides, what points are accorded to each different attribute.
Yet, if we look at the National Health Service, or NHS, in 2019, around 14% of NHS staff were foreign-born, and more than 1 in 5 doctors were from non-EU countries. This is proof that immigration has helped shape the UK into what it is today. And with that, the conversation of whether NHS workers are paid enough has been in question for a long time.
I love my job. I love helping people. I love the knowledge behind it, the skill that we use, but it's just so undervalued and it's so dismissed.
Which takes us back to Boris Johnson's election in 2019, where a big challenge was waiting for him, one that would see him forced to tackle this question head-on. Despite the initial skepticism surrounding his leadership, Boris Johnson proved resilient and unyielding, driving the UK's withdrawal from the EU to its culmination on January 31st, 2020, followed by the implementation of the Brexit deal on December 31st, 2020. This historic moment marked a pivotal change in the UK's relationship with the EU, signaling the end of the nation's 47-year membership in the European Economic Community and the beginning of a new chapter in international relations. The UK regained control over its borders, laws, and trade policy, paving the way for a more unilateral approach to governance and economic development. However, just as the ink was drying on the Brexit deal, the UK faced an even greater challenge in the form of the pandemic. Johnson had been in office for a mere 6 months when the pandemic hit Britain and sparked the greatest peacetime crisis in a century, with the speed and ferocity of the outbreak catching even the most seasoned policymakers off guard. First off, it would be unfair to say that Boris Johnson led to the notion that living in the UK has become impossible for many. As with any prime minister before him, his efforts would always cause a divide. But many would say that he came into office at one of the most challenging times since Winston Churchill stepped into office during the beginning of World War II. Both men had severe obstacles to overcome, but many would argue that Churchill was a natural-born leader, and many doubted Johnson's abilities. Following Boris Johnson's decision to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union, the NHS faced unprecedented strain during the pandemic, which exacerbated long-standing issues such as staffing shortages and escalating waiting lists that continued into 2024. Critics have argued that government funding increases have failed to keep pace with the growing demand for healthcare services, leaving the system under-resourced and overwhelmed. Although NHS workers were granted a 3% pay raise, many felt this was inadequate and insulting given the immense pressures they faced, particularly during the pandemic. In a notable development after nationwide strikes and protests, NHS workers received a 5.5% pay increase in October 2024, backdated to April 1st, 2024, following the recommendations of the NHS pay review body. However, it's not just NHS workers who have been struggling. Life for many UK citizens has been challenging, worrying, and flat out disheartening. As of 2024, the UK is still in the throes of a cost of living crisis. Crime is up 10%, and the country has one of the highest levels of income inequality in Europe.
When the gap between the sacrifices made by people and the service they receive from politicians grows this big, it leads to a weariness in the heart of a nation.
On July 5th, 2024, Keir Starmer, the leader of the majority party in the House of Commons, made history as he was appointed Prime Minister, First Lord of the Treasury, and Minister for the Civil Service by King Charles III. This significant moment marked a turning point in British politics, as Starmer became the first Labour Prime Minister since Gordon Brown held office in 2010. His ascension to leadership came at a time of vibrant political change and public demand for new approaches to governance, particularly in addressing the ongoing challenges within the National Health Service and the economy.
Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community, our NHS back on its feet facing the future, secure borders, safer streets, everyone treated with dignity and respect at work.
Starmer entered office with a plan consisting of 5 bold missions. Firstly, Starmer pledged to get the UK's growth rate to the highest sustained level in the G7, the group of 7 largest advanced economies in the world. The UK's productivity woes have become a pressing concern in the realm of economic policy, especially highlighted by the stark comparisons drawn against other major economies. As it stands, the UK's output per worker lags behind all other G7 countries, with the notable exception of Japan, emphasizing a worrying trend in workplace efficiency and economic dynamism. This gap becomes even more pronounced when considering output per hour worked, where the UK trails significantly behind economic powerhouses like France, Germany, and the United States. Institute for Government made the claim that Starmer's ambitions for economic growth will be relying on luck as much as effective policy if he's to achieve his mission in less than 5 years. His next aim was to have a zero-carbon electricity system by 2030. The goal here is for families and businesses to ultimately have lower bills for good. This is the mission that a huge number of voters rallied behind as many began worrying in 2022, when the typical household energy bills increased by 54% in April and 27% in October, representing shocking numbers that hadn't been seen for decades.
The shock from energy prices this year will be larger than any single year in the 1970s.
Larger than any single year in the 1970s, but actually he might be understating it a little bit.
In November 2024, Commons Library reported that electricity prices in the UK have gradually become more expensive than in most other EU countries. And fuel is becoming a major issue too, stating that unit prices for gas will increase by 1.6% in January 2025, and electricity by 1.4%.
My fuel debt alone was about £3,000. Honestly, I'm looking at my app that I've now installed on my phone, seeing it go up every day. I just have to make choices. Like I just don't put the heating on. I've got a little electric oil-filled heater that I try and heat the whole house with.
Next, Starmer included improving the health service in his 5 missions, focusing on NHS reform, investment in research and development, with the aim of improving preventative health measures, and addressing health inequalities. Out of this, a growing number of Brits have expressed concerns regarding Keir Starmer's proposed increase in research and development investment. While many recognize the potential long-term benefits of bolstering innovation, improving healthcare outcomes, there is a palpable anxiety surrounding the implications of increased capital spending in an already strained economic environment. Critics argue that while investing in R&D can yield extraordinary advancements in medical technology and healthcare delivery, it may divert funds from immediate and pressing needs within NHS, which has faced significant underfunding over the past 25 years. Many citizens, especially those reliant on NHS services, worry that a focus on long-term projects could lead to further delays in addressing staffing shortages, under-resourced facilities, and the dire need for expanded patient access. With immigration still being a major concern in 2024, this has led many to worry that much of their tax money is being spent on tackling net migration rather than the issues mentioned. In April 2023, 37% of the British public said that migration to the UK should be made more difficult for asylum seekers. If you compare this with Spain, where 47% of the public report that immigration makes the country a better place to live, it's clear that the UK is doing something wrong. In 2024 to 2025, the UK government estimates that illegal migration and asylum will cost around £6.4 billion. With population growth booming as a result, it's no wonder that by January 2024, just over half of UK households were still reporting that their cost of living had increased compared with a year earlier. Lastly, another major worry for citizens of the UK is crime.
These teens danced and celebrated after in a man at Hackney Central Station.
London have again taken centre stage as it's revealed that knife and gun crime offences leapt by 20% last year.
While Keir Starmer's 5-mission plan places a significant emphasis on crime prevention, critics have raised concerns that it needs to encompass broader reforms within the entire criminal justice framework. To conclude, it's clear that a massive amount of people in the UK are feeling unhappy. Whether they're struggling to make ends meet, worried for their safety and that of their families, or feeling a sense of mistrust in their government. And sadly, things don't appear to be changing anytime soon. What about the most dangerous neighborhoods in the UK?